Will the anemic residential real estate market finally turn a corner this spring? Well, today's GDP report showed a large increase in home building, suggesting it may, but there are significant overhangs. A short while ago, I spoke with the Obama administration's point person for all things housing, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Shaun Donovan, and we began with that GDP report today.
Well, clearly, there have been significant improvements in the underlying conditions. We're coming out of the best winter of home sales that we've had since the crisis began, and there's increasing confidence that we are seeing a rebound. One of the home price indices showed the first year-over-year increase in home prices since 2007, just released a few days ago. But there's more that we need to do. We have millions of homeowners around the country that could benefit from today's record low interest rates below 4%. They could save $2,500 to $3,000 a year by refinancing, but they can't because they're underwater.
When you talk about some of those brighter spots, when you speak to some of the brightest names in housing, the Carl Paces of the world, some major investors, they point to a lot of institutional buying that's driving up property prices in certain regions of the country. Little boomlets, because this is basically an investment property, not necessarily a home being lived in by the person purchasing it. Do you worry that perhaps there could be a micro speculative bubble in some of these regional markets?
You know, generally speaking, one of the more encouraging trends is that the number of investor purchases, the number of distressed sales, is actually declining as a percent of all purchases. So I think the real story, while there may be particular neighborhoods or markets that have a somewhat different story, the national story is that more home buyers are coming off the sidelines and purchasing homes, driven by record low interest rates, good pricing, and a broader strengthening in the economy. So I actually don't think that's the story of what we're seeing. The story is a broader return of confidence and improvement in the fundamentals.
Well, you told the Senate Banking Committee just yesterday that you don't have plans to submit an overhaul of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at this time. If there is a second Obama administration, is that at the top of the agenda?
Look, we, over a year ago, presented a vision for housing finance reform, including Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The steps that we can take with our own powers, we're not going to wait for Congress. We're going to keep moving on those. And so we've made changes on pricing and loan limits and a set of things that are within our control. What we can't do is make Congress act if they can't come to some bipartisan agreement on the step forward. So we're working with Congress, having those conversations, but ultimately, to get to broader reform for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, we need Congress to act.
Will you submit any new plans for an overhaul before the end of this term?
Again, we are working with Congress. If it would be helpful in reaching resolution, we would certainly consider doing that. But at this point, we need a bipartisan consensus to emerge on reform to be able to move this forward. This really is about Congress taking that step.
Governor Romney said that if he is elected to the presidency, that he sees no need for HUD, basically, for the entire HUD program. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into politics here. I think the most important thing is the mission of what we're trying to do. And let's be clear, this president and I personally am not going to let those veterans, those people with disabilities or seniors sleep on the streets, and we're going to continue pushing on the mission of HUD. And we've got to have a balanced way of reducing our deficit, but also protecting the most vulnerable in our country.
Secretary Donovan said if he was asked to serve, he would in a second Obama administration.